Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Okay, Benjamin, I'm going to ask you one of our more telling questions for all of our interns, so I want you to, this is the one to really think about, okay? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
When I'm 80.
And I love myself. The world is a ghetto.
Remember a few weeks ago we talked about the senior intern program?
Seniors in high school or college?
No. Seniors in life.
Hold on, what?
That's our founder and CEO, Jules Austin.
Any tips before I go in?
Blink.
Blink.
She hates when people don't blink. It weirds her out.
Hi, Jules. I'm Ben, your new intern.
I'm glad you also see the humor in this.
Be hard not to.
I will email you when I have something for you to do.
I'll wait to hear from you, sir. I'm terribly sorry. Excuse me.
So you're Jules' new driver?
No, actually, I'm her intern.
That's hysterical.
My intern sure keeps busy.
Mr. Congeniality. Everybody loves him.
You should dress to impress. Tuck in the shirt. Why doesn't anybody tuck anything in anymore? Oh, I'm asking you.
I'm Fiona, the house masseuse.
Ben.
How's that been?
Well, oh boy.
Here you go. You're not as old as I thought you were.
So you're on Facebook, huh?
I joined about 10 minutes ago.
Well, better late than never. All right, so there are all these questions for your profile that you can answer if you want to, like people who inspire you.
Jules Austin. You do inspire, Jules.
Our investors just think that a seasoned CEO could take some things off your plate.
I mean, give me CEO lessons.
I never had anything like this in my life. This big, beautiful, exciting thing that you created. Remember who did that?
Who?
Good times.
It's moments like this when you need someone you know you can count on. Because you're my
intern.
Well, I was gonna say intern / best friend. Look and learn, boys, because this is what cool is. How in one generation have men gone from guys like Jack Nicholson and Harrison Ford to...
Oh boy.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, generations working together. Joining us to talk more about it are Lori Piper, Director of Human Resources at the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce. Next to her is Lakeland Hogan. Lakeland is a graduate of UNO. She is also a home care consultant with Home Instead Senior Care. Thanks to the two of you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So Lori, before I ask the first question I wanted to ask, talk a little bit about kind of where you've been and how you wound up working in HR at the Chamber.
Great. I spent 25 years working for a great service organization in town, the Omaha Housing Authority. Started there not in an HR position and really grew to appreciate the value that HR can bring to an organization and being part of a leadership team. So I stayed with that organization, left there, had my own small business doing HR consulting. And about 15 years ago, went to the Greater Omaha Chamber. I'd had a long-time relationship with that organization and took on the HR role there. So that's just been a passion of mine. A lot of it has to do with, I think, the impact HR can have on the culture of an organization and making it a great place to be.
So what is your favorite part about what you do day in and day out in terms of that world?
I think it really is about creating an environment where people want to come to work every day. That's just part of, I say to the staff, I really want you to wake up and say, I get to go to work there. And I know that sounds crazy, but for me, it matters. It matters that when you get up tomorrow, you're excited about the work that you're going to come and do. So it's about culture. That's all it is for me.
Yeah, and a culture that is changing, an environment that is changing. I'm very curious as you're watching that movie clip from The Intern, for someone who's been doing this for as long as you have, exposed to it as long as you've been, what are you thinking watching that clip?
Well, the first thing was I was really excited about seeing Andrew Reynolds. He's an Omaha native, and he's He's showing up in that show. It's just great. But I think part of it really is to see he is who he is. He didn't want to retire, it looked like, but he wanted to be who he was. So he came in a suit, even though he was the only one in a suit. I loved that eventually people were asking him questions. The relationship question, when the gentleman watched his kind of girlfriend walk by, and getting feedback about, well, I sent her an email, isn't that good enough? And the intern was, well, did you talk to her? Because in his generation, a conversation was much more impactful than an email with smiley-faced emoticons. And so that kind of difference, I thought that was really fun to watch. But again, it's all about relationships and building those and trust. And I found that really fascinating, I can't wait to see the show.
Yeah, and it's really, we are in an unprecedented time now where we have the 4 generations all working together, and we're going to talk about those in just a few minutes. But from where you're sitting, is that a bit jolting that we now have that many and that there are going to be the dynamics at play and everything else, Lori?
I think for places, employers that pay attention to that, it's really not that big of a deal. It is amazing to walk into an organization and see 20-somethings and 70-somethings. We have that in my own organization. We have somebody who's been there 55 years, and we have people straight out of college. So we understand how it's important to create a culture that respects and appreciates and values each person and what they bring individually. But it's not all that hard to do. I know some of the best places to work in Omaha don't make a big deal about culture differences or age differences because it's a part of who they are that they just respect and value each individual. So it's looking at the individual person.
Okay, Lakeland, let's look at the individual generations now. We want to put a graphic up for our viewers, and if you would just walk us through those 4 generations and give us a brief definition of each.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So we first have the silent generation, which is sometimes also referred to as the veterans, and they have some very unique characteristics. They're very practical and very respectful. As you saw in that video clip, he was very respectful towards his boss and his coworkers. They're very accustomed to hierarchical leadership, and they place duty above their personal ambitions. That seems to be some general characteristics of that generation. And then you have the baby boomers, where they live to work and they're very driven. They also can be very achievement oriented and have a very optimistic outlook. And they also can be very collaborative and enjoy working in a consensus-based environment with consensus-based leaders. And then that Generation X is next. They work to live and have a very good work-life balance. That's kind of where that whole mentality came into play. They're very self-reliant, and they focus on individuality, but they're also very creative and innovative, very entrepreneurial, and they have had an increased use of technology that's been introduced in their generation, and they have more of a loyalty to experienced mentors as opposed to an organization. So that's something that's kind of unique about that generation. They might follow an employee to another organization if that opportunity arises. And then you have the millennials, which happens to be my generation. Very technologically savvy. We've pretty much grown up with it our whole lives, but we're also very multicultural. We've experienced we have a more global view of the world, and we're also very collaborative. We also have a tendency to be close to our parents and our supervisors at work, but at the same time we're very confident, sophisticated, and I hate to admit, but we're a little self-centered and sometimes impatient, and we want immediate feedback in the workplace. So that kind of gives you just an overview of the different generations and some of their very unique characteristics.
So a definition is one thing, and thank you for walking us through all of those. Reality can sometimes be another, and I find it interesting the 3 of us represent 3 of those 4 generations. And so, Lakeland, from where you sit, because I think the millennials sometimes get the short end of the stick. You're making the rest of us work and think a little bit harder in terms of that technology, right? So, based on what you just described for us, do millennials get a fair shake there, do you think? And if not, how would you explain that then?
Well, I think that there are some millennials that definitely fit those criteria. But I think, some of the main themes across our generation are we're more culturally aware. We've grown up in a society where we have access to the internet. We've been able to travel where maybe as our parents or grandparents didn't have that opportunity. And we also are very technologically savvy, which actually has led us to be more collaborative because we are engaging with individuals not only face-to-face, but through email and through text, through Facebook. So we really do enjoy a collaborative environment. So while some are more self-centered than others, or maybe a little more difficult to work with. I think, again, it comes down to the individual. We kind of talked about that earlier, and how that one individual millennial is compared to another. There can be some definite similarities, but there can be differences as well.
And Lori, isn't that common though among generations in general, right? I could be sitting next to another Generation X person, and we could be pretty different. I liken myself probably more to the baby boom generation. I missed it by a year. But yeah, so talk about that in terms of setting the realistic expectations so we're not just instantly labeled one or another. Going back maybe even to childhood and the expectations or the way that we lived growing up and how that kind of brought us to where we are today.
It's interesting, and I'm thankful for Lakeland and the other millennials in the workplace, because I think they challenge the rest of us to look at life differently and to look at work differently. Many of my peers, those who've been in the workplace a long time, are tired, and they've worked, work is what they're defined by. And it's refreshing, at least for me, to see the younger folks coming in and saying, I really want a job and I want to be able to contribute. And I bring a lot of skill, but I want a life outside of that. And so I think I am thankful for that. So thank you. I think we are all impacted by our parents and the other persons who were giving care, teachers and things like that. So depending on the age of someone and where their parents were as they were growing up, I think that has a lot to do with, how people form who they are, their work ethic, what they saw their parents doing, what they don't want to do because they saw their parents doing that. I think that's a lot of it. I also feel like, with the whole idea of technology, I happen to be someone that would much prefer a face-to-face conversation, or at least a phone conversation, than an email, especially if it's a challenging topic. That's a little harder sometimes. Millennials are fast. And so if you respond, you send something, they'll quickly respond, and you don't really get the kind of to understand exactly how they meant it. You just read what you read. So I think there are challenges in the workplace based on that. Again, I find that if you recognize it and talk about it, it's really more about the individual, as she talked about. Some millennials are maybe more selfish than others, but so are some people my age. So it's just as an employer or a manager or a supervisor or a mentor, it's getting to know that person for who they are and what they bring. They may have some of those characteristics that Lakeland talked about, but they may not.
Well, and that goes back to when you talk about getting to know somebody, especially from where you sit, that goes back to even looking at the resume and then going through the interview process. So from an HR perspective, and I don't want to assume anything here, but probably not as much about age as it is about truly what they bring to the table and how they're going to fit.
Oh, it absolutely is. And often today, you can't tell how old someone is by their resume. We've been taught, remove dates so that you don't date yourself. You can tell if somebody's a recent college grad or they only have a year or two of work experience. They're probably younger. But yeah, you just have to, at least I believe, as someone comes into an organization, you just have to learn how they best work, what's the best way to manage them. So it's more challenging for managers and supervisors and leaders of organizations. It's a lot more work because it's not a cookie cutter anymore. You can't do the same thing for every person.
Yeah, how they best work, and you mentioned something earlier I found interesting, how long they stay with an organization. I think there's definitely a difference there where you said someone was with a company for 55 years. And Lakeland, correct me if I'm wrong, do you see, and maybe you're an exception to the rule, but do you see folks your age staying in a place for 55 years? And if not, why is that happening?
You know, working somewhere for just a few years, 2 to 3, is something that I've seen just among my friend group. You know, if a better opportunity arises, they don't feel that sense of loyalty that maybe my parents' generation or the generation before them felt to their organization. I think that's where that self-centeredness comes in. They want the next best opportunity. Or if they find an opportunity where they get to work for an organization that maybe their values and passions align better with, they're quick to kind of jump ship from one organization to another. Because I found that that's something that my generation, they really want to be involved in an organization. Not only the work that they do, they want it to be meaningful, but they also want to work for an organization that they believe in.
Mm-hmm. Laura, I would believe that in and of itself is probably one of the biggest challenges, because every company, I would imagine, wants that stability, wants that loyalty, wants that commitment. And it doesn't mean that someone of Lakeland's generation isn't loyal or committed. They're just coming from different places. So when we're talking about that dynamic, that environment, you've got the one who's been there 55 years. Well, they see the Lakelands coming and going through the door. What does that do in terms of impact on the workplace?
I think HR professionals have learned in the last 5 or 6 or maybe 10 years that it's really okay on a resume for someone to have jumped every 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. In years past, you would look at that and say, not stable, they're not staying, and you'd throw their resume to the side. Mm-hmm. Now you look at exactly what she talked about. What's important to a millennial is that they're doing meaningful work, that their opinions count. That matters a lot. And that they work for an organization that cares about them. At least that's what we have seen. And so for HR people, it does mean a little more of a revolving door. So when you're looking to recruit and retain folks, you better be really good and have a great reputation, because that door's going to open again for the next candidate to come through. And so in order to recruit the best, people have to leave you for a better opportunity and for a great reason, not just that you're not such a great employer, because you'll have a harder time recruiting.
Well, I would imagine too, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the long range planning. You know, every organization looks at their short term and also their long term. Well, with this shift, that's going to be much more challenging, I would imagine, to try to figure out, because normally people would base that on the folks they have, hoping that they're going to be there for the long haul. Would you agree?
I would. Young people, especially, I think are very talented and grasp things quickly. They've had experiences throughout high school and college, international travel, many things that older persons have not had. So they're a little more adaptable. It doesn't take a real long time for a young person to come into an organization, learn what needs to be done, and get moving. And so yes, that is a challenge because you're dealing with the work that you have today and the people you have, but it's not insurmountable.
We've talked about the generations in terms of ages. We put those years up earlier. Let's talk a little bit more about culture, Lori. And first of all, how is it that you define, I think people think of it differently, how do you define culture? And we'll work our way out from there.
Okay. I really think part of it is environmental. It's what your office looks like, but it's also in how people treat each other within your organization. It's your president and CEO and their expectations of behavior in your organization. So if you have a culture that is open and you expect that people will come to you if there's a problem, but they're respectful to each other, that's the expectation. And so you have to hold that. You have to set those standards pretty high, especially when you have a lot of different cultures or age groups of people. It's unacceptable to say something derogatory. It's unacceptable, and you have to deal with that pretty quick. And then you have an organization that values individual contributions. I do think there's a lot to say with more open physical environments, collaborative spaces for working. We kind of call them hotel spaces, so you can drop down anywhere and work. That works great for some, not great for others, and that really doesn't have a lot to do with their age. At least that's been my experience. So culture, again, part of it is paying attention to the tools that people need to do their work, that they're doing meaningful work, that their opinions count. I talked about that a little while ago. That matters a lot. The kinds of things that lots of people are measuring by engagement surveys. But lots of people care about culture today, and I am thankful for that, because I think that makes workplaces better. And you can know the reputation of an organization. I look at Lakeland's organization. They are best places to work winners for years in a row because they create an environment where people want to be. So the culture is.
Yeah, and Lakeland can speak consistently to that. You grew up around the organization where you now work, and I guess just from where you're sitting and your vision of things, how has it changed? I mean, you literally grew up around all of that, and you were able to see, and to Lori's point, Home Instead Senior Care, very successful in what it's doing. Why is that? Huge organization, but for some reason has kind of that small organizational feel, and that it's welcoming and warm. How do they pull that off?
Well, it is the culture. And the founders, Paul and Lori Hogan, my parents, they have maintained, we call it the Home Instead culture, globally. So no matter what home instead you walk into, whether it's in the neighboring state or across the ocean, there's that same feeling. And one of our core values is to treat each other with dignity and respect. And you talked about how important it is to, treat each individual with respect. And I think also they just, they do value the individual and the contributions that person brings. Our corporate office has a day literally called Celebrate You, and it's all about the employees and their accomplishments over the past year. It's just a time to celebrate the wins of the year, and just little things like that. I think across the generations, people they value, sometimes some of them value monetary rewards or recognition. So I think within Home Instead, that Celebrate You Day kind of hits across all generations. It's just a day to celebrate the individual and those accomplishments that they brought to the table, and talking about how that made the overall organization successful. So I think really that's what's attributed to our success as a global company, is just maintaining that culture and carrying it through to every location.
A lot of it has to do with a person's manager and the person to whom they report. But she talked about core values, and that makes such a difference because you've established what that means to your organization. Family is one of the values we have in our organization, and that spans the globe from young people to older people who have parents to take care of or children to take care of. Just knowing what those are and being able to hold people accountable to living by those has to start at the top for sure, but each level of manager also needs to respect that.
Wow, and things you've said applicable whether you're a small company or a big company. It's like so much else, it's foundational. You get that piece right and the rest of it goes from there. In the minutes that we have remaining, there is a conference that is coming up that speaks to all of this, so folks wanting to learn more can certainly hone in on that. Lori, tell us about the day.
So it's Monday, October 19th. It's going to be here at UNO. We are really excited. We've been working on it for about a year. We will break the day open with Libby Sartain, who is the former HR leader at both Yahoo and Southwest Airlines. So we are excited about her coming. She brings a wealth of experience, and I think will challenge us to think bigger in how we deal with generations in the workplace. So she's going to talk about that. We have a day full of speakers, presenters on topics, ethics topics, wellness in the workplace. Joe Gerstan, who is an expert in diversity, will be there speaking about unconscious bias. So we have spent a lot of time looking at the quality of presenters. We have a lunch presentation by Glenn Van Ekeren. We'll talk a lot about kind of the why. Why do people do what they do? How can we make sure that people enjoy coming to work based on their, the why? So we're excited about that. Lakeland is actually part of a really cool panel that we've got that's going to start out the day and actually end the day as well. So.
Yes, I would like her to talk about that because I think it's fantastic how we're going to launch it and then bring it full circle at the end. So tell us about this amazing panel, Lakeland.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of this panel, first and foremost, but it'll be myself and Matt Manelli. He's also at Home Instead, but he's from that Generation X. And then we have we have Tom from the veterans generation, and then we have someone from the baby boomer generation as well. And so Carolina is that representative. So we also have some diversity on the panel. So we're going to have a very great discussion on how the generations and cultural differences affect our workplace. We're going to start it out with a skit, a little bit of entertainment, but that skit kind of brings to light a few points that we'll touch on later in the panel. So it'll just be, I think, fun, informational, but again, just a great way to close up the conference with that panel.
I'm kind of excited. The end of the day will bring around kind of a plan of action. We've all been to conferences where you learn a lot during the day and then you go back to your work the next day and you say, well, that was good. And you don't really have a plan. So at the end of the day, we'll pull together a lot of what they've learned and ask each individual to create kind of a plan of action. So I'm excited about it. The registrations are coming in well, and we're looking for a great day.
Lori, based on the HR perspective specifically, what do you see as being the greatest value add? So you have companies coming in thinking, okay, that's great, this all sounds good, but what is the biggest takeaway, do you think, for folks?
I think there'll be practical things that HR people can take back to their companies and implement. We're going to learn a little bit about some community activities that are going on in Omaha around generations, how they are successful, why they are successful. But I think the biggest takeaway for an HR professional is really learning a little more and perhaps digging a little deeper into understanding generational differences, bias, cultural differences, and figuring out a way to help bridge those. So I think that's the takeaway.
Like on about 30 seconds, why should millennials go to this conference?
Well, I read actually recently that by 2020, 50% of the workforce will be millennials. So that should be reason enough for millennials to come, because there's going to be so many of us in the workforce, and we're going to need to know how to work with the generations that came before us. So it's going to be fun and entertaining and educational, so that's why they should come.
Excellent.
I'll be there.
Excellent. Well, we want to put the graphic back up so that we can show folks where they need to be for more information. So again, this is called Aging with Passion and Purpose, Generations Working Together. It will take place on Monday, October 19th, UNO's Barbara White's Community Engagement Center. For more information, you can log on to unomaha.edu/Gero, and that phone number at the bottom of your screen, 402-554-2272. Lori, Lakeland, thank you so much for being here. Best wishes with the conference. I'm sure it'll go very, very well. Best wishes to the two of you, too. Thank you. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.